Today, I'm speaking with Hayley Akins, founder of Motion Hatch, a school that helps motion designers and creatives grow their business. Hayley is one of the OGs, if not the OG, in this space. She's been doing this since 2017 and has helped a ton of people in the industry. So I wanted to get her on to talk about marketing, how it's changing for creatives, and how to really speak and find prospects online on social, and just how she feels the industry is changing and where it's going. We also spoke about how her business has developed, the motion designer's journey, kind of alignment and authenticity online, and much, much more. As always, if you want to support the show, you can leave a rating for it on Spotify or wherever you listen, or share it with a friend. So now I give you Hayley Akins. So Hayley, you've been helping motion designers build their businesses for quite a long time, since 2017, I think. And it came out of your own frustration, I believe, of like not enough resources out there. But I'm interested to dive in a little bit just to that first year and like what the inception was like. Like, how did it start? How did it get going? Like, what were your first actions like in building Motion Hatch?
Yeah, so you're right. You've done your research. It started in 2017. It started as a podcast. And why I started a podcast is really because I didn't hear anyone having these conversations around the business side of motion design. I was currently a freelance motion designer. I think I went freelance 2 years before that, I want to say, in 2015. And I was really frustrated by the fact that there was loads of tutorials, loads of stuff online about like how to, get started with After Effects, all of that stuff, which is great. But really, people weren't talking about how to get clients, how to price your work. And really, I think this is almost 50% of what we need to know to be a freelance motion designer. So at the time, I was really into traveling a lot. And I took a month off to go travel around Myanmar and also Thailand, which was really awesome. And I wanted to be a freelancer who took some time to do that kind of thing. And that kind of led me along this path to joining this membership called Location Indie, which was about freelancing and traveling and being a digital nomad, which I wasn't really a digital nomad at the time, but I like this idea of like, freelancing and using your time off and not kind of worrying so much like, well, when's the next project going to come? That kind of stuff. So I got involved with that group and I was like, oh, someone should make this for freelance motion designers and talk about the business side of things. But I sort of didn't really think like, oh, this could be me. And at the time, there was a lot of blogs around and I was really rubbish at writing. So I was thinking, okay, well, someone should probably do that, but that's not me because I can't really write and all this stuff. Then what happened was I actually went to a meetup with the people from Location Indie. There was only 4 of us there, and I met a guy called Jeremy who was just about to start his podcasting business. Now, to this day, we don't know whether he just did this to get me as a client, but it's kind of like an in-joke between us, I guess. And then he was like, you know what you should do? You should start a podcast around the business side of motion design. And I thought, oh, everyone's going to hate my voice. So I don't know how it really happened after that. But after that, he helped me to start the Motion Hatch podcast, basically. And everyone really, really loved it. And it had amazing response. So it sort of just kicked off from there. And then we created more resources and a contract bundle and a mastermind. And I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. So it sounded like really like the right time, because from what you've said and from what I can glean, that no one else was really doing this at that time. And you've had like, it seems like quite a strong impact on the industry. Whoever I speak to tends to know about Motion Hatch, or a lot of people do. But like, seriously, all modesty aside, do you have a perception of like your impact on the industry in any way? And again, all modesty aside, because I know you're quite a humble person.
Yeah. I think that we do have a big impact. And I think what's important to me is, I do have a team. And like I said, from the beginning, I had a podcast editor in Jeremy. And I think it's important to acknowledge that I haven't built this all on my own. I've had people that have really helped me along the way. And just even everyone who listens to the podcast and watches the YouTube videos and becomes students of ours, that all really helps to keep Motion Hatch going. And really for us to put more content out there as well and help more people. And that's what's really important to me. And I think it has had a huge impact on the industry. And it's just really nice to see more people talking about this kind of stuff now, more broadly as well. And I really appreciate that, because it's more like I wished it was when I started freelancing, and kind of that was what was really important to me.
Yeah, nice. So for those of you listening who don't know about Hayley's work, you should definitely listen to the latest, or one of the latest School of Motion podcasts with Joey, where they talk a lot about the kind of this broad topic area. And one of the things that I wanted to dive into with a little bit more detail was this idea of speaking to prospects. Primarily on LinkedIn was the example you gave, but obviously more broadly, just like on LinkedIn, you mentioned on that podcast, a number of years ago, the algorithm, as such, you have to imagine that the algorithm was doing stuff where, like, if you just posted your motion design, people would find it, would post it everywhere. But now, whether it's due to lots of people being on there or some other reason, what tends to happen is that if you just post your work about motion design, you tend to just find and be connected with motion designers. And the goal of, obviously, freelancers and studios is to find people in industries to do work for, to put it really simply. So I guess the question, to put it again really simply, is like, from your students and your knowledge right now, I know it's tricky, but like, what are you finding that works when creating content that's sort of steering the algorithm towards prospects rather than people like you? That's kind of inarticulately put, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I think just going back to that podcast that I did with Joey, we talked a lot about our freelance funnel framework, which is awareness, attraction, action, and advocacy. And what I think is really good about having a strategy when you're posting on LinkedIn or elsewhere is really thinking about, what do I really want this post to do, right? Every post should have a job. So if you're thinking, okay, the job of this post then is to create awareness, of me and my work, then it can be a little bit broader. It doesn't have to always be directly to your ideal client, but the point of an awareness post is usually to get the most eyes on it possible, right? So you can kind of craft that in a way where it could be more broad and it could include the audience of your ideal clients, but it also can include your current kind of motion design audience, right? And I feel like the master of this is Kevin Rapp. He's really good at kind of bringing in his ideal client into his post, but also really, really appealing to motion designers as well. And anyone who kind of has a big audience, I think is bridged that gap quite well, because I think it is tough to do that. But so what I think about awareness type posts is just think about, like, what are trends, what are kind of things that I can talk about that kind of broader, maybe is stuff like to do with like what you stand for, your personality, like all of these kind of things. And then I think about attraction type posts as really like more behind the scenes of your work. And I feel like these ones are the ones that can be really talking to your ideal client, right? Because if you think about it, your project should solve a problem for a client. So really dig into that there and really talk about, hey, this is a project that I did that I really loved, and this is what problem it solved. And I feel like that's how we can start to communicate with our ideal client, and you can kind of hone that in over time. On the next rung down, we have action, which is more like a call to action type post, which is what most people do on LinkedIn at the moment and other social media platforms. They're just like, here's my reel, here's my work. And they don't really do these awareness and attraction posts, which are like the warming up type posts, right? Because I'm sure if you just go onto any social platform and just talk about yourself all the time, people aren't going to be attracted to that, right? So you kind of have to do a strategy where you're doing a bit of warming up, an awareness post, an attraction post, then maybe you can post your reel and say, hey, here's my work, that type of stuff. But I feel like as we kind of move into 2025, I think what we're going to see more is people combining these awareness posts and these attraction posts with a really good call to action. And I feel like if you can master that, then you're going to be really successful on social media.
Right. So do you ever find, I'm interested with your students, like, actually, I won't pretend this isn't about me. So if I was freelance right now, and I'm not, I know I'd be struggling with this whole thing about posting on LinkedIn or posting elsewhere. And I still do it. I'm like warming up with it. But I do find sometimes an issue with spontaneity, like especially when you think about like frameworks, which are really valuable, obviously. But it's like, do you ever find your students like having this struggle with a kind of like an intention? Like, I want this post to do something. I'm trying to like elicit something in my youth. I'm trying to make the algorithm do this or find this, and also just like genuinely sharing information. Because I find sometimes that kind of intentionality can kind of create a blocker. Maybe I'm just thinking about it too much. I'm just interested as to whether your students struggle with the same sort of thing.
Yes, I think everyone struggles with this.
Right.
I think it's a really good question. So, there's a couple of things that I would do, right? One thing, I think you just have to start. Please just start posting. It's scary, it's hard. I remember when I was first posting the podcast, I always relate it to this because I was thinking, oh no, everyone will hate it and it will be terrible and all of this stuff. And now I just post online so much that like sometimes if you get one comment, you're like, oh, who cares? Like the majority of people like it, right? So you kind of get over that thing. And the thing about social media as well, right? It doesn't stick around that long, especially if it's not any good. It kind of just disappears into the algorithm and is sort of like almost never seen again, if it's not very good and people don't like it and don't comment on it. So I think that's worth remembering. And I think it's a little bit like just having that attitude of like, hey, I'm going to post once a week on LinkedIn. It doesn't really matter what I'm posting. That's how I would get started. Then I would layer the strategy on top of that. And how to get started with that is we have a free social media guide. We've got 52 example posts from different motion designers using this framework. So I'll pop that on a link at motionhatch.com/Jack, and then everyone can go over there and have a look at that, because I feel like that really helps everyone just get some ideas and just get started. And I think that's the most important thing to do.
Yeah. And also, just from my limited experience, I think it's about alignment as well. Like when it hasn't worked for me, the content I'm putting out is like contrived. It's not aligned with where I'm wanting to go, my natural interests as well. And there's this other point that you made as well on the School of Motion podcast, which is that clients or prospects tend not to like or engage. They tend to just watch, which I thought was a really useful point to remember. And just because you don't get a number of likes does not mean it's not effective. And it's just all about iteration.
Yeah, I think just on that point, like it's mostly as well about staying top of mind, even with your existing network, right? This is something that I think a lot of people forget about. So, for example, when I go to like an event or something like that, I'll often say, hey, let's stay in touch on LinkedIn. Like, hopefully they're on LinkedIn and they actually look at it, but they might not necessarily post, but I post. So I know that if we connect on there, that they're going to see my posts at least for a while. And if they like it, then they'll see more of my posts, right? So that's just a really good way of staying top of mind with the people you meet at events, with your current clients. Like invite them on LinkedIn, say, hey, it was really great to work on this project with you. I just thought I'd connect here. It doesn't have to be like a big deal, but it means that if you're the one who's posting and other motion designers aren't, they're going to keep seeing you popping up in their feed. And even if you comment, I think it still shows up that you commented on something in with people that follow you. So I think it's worth bearing this in mind, that social media isn't just a tool that will get you new clients. It helps to keep your existing clients or your potential clients warmed up as well.
Yeah. And on that note, you mentioned events, and you said recently that you went to an event and you explained it was a non-motion, non-design kind of like event, and you explained to people what motion design was or what you did, and they said, "Oh, that's really useful. I could do with that." I'm interested, firstly, like what you would say or what you did say there. Yeah, can you remember how you described it or how you would advise people to describe it? Because I'm like, we're finding this as well in like the space of visual development or no code. It's like trying to explain this like new paradigm for people who don't know about this paradigm is quite challenging sometimes, but when they get it, when they grok it, they need it and they want it.
Yeah, so I mean, I probably didn't do the best explanation in the world, but it was probably something along the lines of, motion design is basically when you see something on a screen that's moving that isn't like a cartoon, that's usually had a motion designer behind it. And it's usually advertising something, right? So if you see something on social media or you see something like on the TV or something like that and it's moving, it's basically between graphics and animation, but it's not like Disney. And I probably said something like that, I think.
I love
But
it.
usually if you kind of make the connection between like moving graphics and advertising, then I think people who like run businesses tend to, get along with that explanation.
Right. Yeah. And so related to that, I have a couple of questions at least around like where you see the industry needs right now in motion. Like obviously it feels like video is eating the internet, like everyone's doing video. how much motion work is being used there. Like people are obviously spinning up like their own simple videos that they've made, and there are services that can automate this. But do you see, I guess the question could be phrased like, do you see the role of a motion designer's job changing to not just be like, I do motion design assets for like short, like header animations or like promos or explainer videos, but also just sort of part of a pipeline of creating marketing videos, like this kind of fast cadence of videos that we're seeing now being put out by most businesses. Do you see that changing in any way?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people that I've been speaking to recently have been saying a lot of their work is kind of shifting away from the traditional explainer video more into, short and snappy social media kind of content, which, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I think there's opportunity there. And also a lot of people have been talking more about like interactive animations on websites and things like that. And, a few people talking about VR, AR stuff. I feel like that still feels a little bit further away, but I think it's probably coming. I feel like people are like talking about that more. I with all of this stuff, especially like new technology stuff, I always think the more and more eyeballs that are going to be there from a consumer perspective, that's when the advertisers are going to be there, and that's when the money is going to be there. So just a little note on that. That's kind of how I think about that sort of stuff. But, I think people who are thinking about that stuff now obviously will have a leg up in the future, but definitely like interactive animations on websites are like here already, like talking about social media. Obviously, I think there's a way to start with like a social media package and kind of upgrade your clients almost onto different packages, like solving different problems for them and things like that. So that's sort of what I see happening at the moment. But like you say, there's just screens everywhere. And I feel like this is a big opportunity for us as motion designers.
So I'm interested to know like the surprising niches or areas or industries that some of your students might have gone in that you may never have thought about before. Because I feel like as a motion designer who does sort of standard middle of the road stuff, like it's very easy to sort of not appreciate how broad the landscape of motion can be. In other words, all the different ways you can create motion, both in terms of like the platform or the paradigm and also the industry. So I'm wondering if you have any top of mind examples from like your students of like very edge case kind of like, yeah, motion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether they're that like surprising, but I've got some good examples of different ones. So, like one of my students, Luke Stanley, he created a company essentially that only sells motion brand guidelines, and that even wasn't a thing. Like I think a couple of years ago when he started it, and now I know there's like a couple of other studios and stuff that are kind of popping up around that. But it kind of made perfect sense when he explained it to me at the time. Like we were having a coaching call and he said, hey, I've got this idea of doing more motion brand guidelines because we already have like obviously brand guidelines. Everyone's aware of that. But at the time, it was only really Google, I think, that had motion brand guidelines. And now I feel like that's kind of catching on a little bit more. So I think that's a really good example. I don't know whether that's surprising. I mean, it's kind of following on from brand guidelines, which makes sense, right? But I feel like that's really key. It's like what is already out there that essentially works like in a different industry, like graphic design, what a graphic designer is providing that could be moving. That's maybe like a train of thought you could follow down. And then I think some other things recently is like, more like internal videos and things like that. People don't really think about that. It's not sexy, but like quite a few people are getting paid to get to do these types of videos, like things that come to mind, are like doing videos for like innovation and stuff like that. That's not something that I know tons about, but I know that a lot of people have got work in that area. So things like that, I think it's just thinking about, okay, more about what do you love and what are you passionate about and how you could kind of blend that with motion design. That's what I'd recommend people to do, because I think if you're kind of trying to chase trends or like do something where you're like, oh, I think this is going to be like the next big thing, I don't really see that works very well. What works really well is thinking about what am I really passionate about that's unique to me, and how can I really, help someone with motion design who maybe does that. So, for example, like when I created Motion Hatch, I really liked, the business side of things and learning about that and been an entrepreneur and I also really liked motion design. So I sort of just blended them together and created something unique. And I think that is really what I'd suggest that people do rather than kind of chasing trends almost.
Yeah. I suppose that also applies to skill set because there are so many tools and technologies now, and that's
Yes.
only going to keep increasing. That you can't do what people did, as Joey mentioned on the show that you did with him. Like, new client calls, says I need this, and then he has to learn a bunch of new things. Like that's long gone. Like everyone needs to specialize a little bit more now. Do you see it kind of like, so I just interviewed Seti Taylor, who's kind of describes himself as a multidisciplinary artist, and he does both web design, technical motion design for like stadium stuff, as well as normal video stuff, and sound design. Do you see that more and more now that people have like a few different skill sets? Because like I'm in the world of software and motion, and I do think, again, you mentioned about Rive, VR, things like that. I do see this convergence in however many years where like a motion designer and a software developer might actually be very close. But yeah, I'm just interested whether you have whether you see like multidisciplinary artists more and more now.
Yeah, I think so, but I also think if you're going to do lots of different things, you have to be more specific about the client.
Right.
So like you either have to be very specific about your skill. So, I have a student at the moment, he makes, a lot of money doing like Unreal stuff and 3D and things like that. So you either have to be really specific about the skills, and like you said, I think that's kind of disappearing almost a little bit, because all the tools are more accessible and stuff like that. But either that or you have a really specific client that you do a lot of different things for.
Right.
So I don't think you can be like, I do lots of different things for everyone, because then who are you targeting with your marketing?
Totally.
I just can't, I wouldn't be able to figure that out. So I'm not sure how someone else would. But
Sure.
if you're like, this is the product I offer people, then you can be more broad with who that product is for, as long as it solves a specific problem. Or you can be like, this is the type of client that I help with, video, motion design. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And talking of products, nice segue. It's not a nice segue. That was too obvious. Client Quest and Balanced Business are the kind of two main courses at Motion Hatch.
Yes.
And like one of them in my mind, you may describe it or think of it differently. One of them in my mind is like from 0 to 1, like the kind of growth stage of like actually getting clients for the first time. And from what I can see of the second one, I haven't like taken it or anything. It's more about like relaxing, finding sustainability, like growing in a way that's more sort of balanced. Would that be a fair description?
In some ways, yes. I mean, I look at Client Quest and basically it's where we teach you how to build in the freelance funnel framework into your whole business, so that social media, CRM and everything, it works really well for that. And I think a lot of people, to be honest, don't have structure and strategy in their marketing and outreach. So I think it can work for everyone. But yes, like it essentially is supposed to be when you're just starting out. But obviously we have people who have been a freelance motion designer for like 3 years plus, and they're like, I need this because I've been relying on only referrals up until now, and I want to actually build some systems in my business to actually get clients where I know, which lever to pull in my marketing that will actually bring me in leads. So just from that point of view, I think it makes sense for everybody to kind of look at that. But then, yeah, you're right. Like Balanced Business Bootcamp is for people who've at least been in the industry or as a freelancer for 3 years plus, or a studio owner who are looking for more balance in the sense that they already have clients. Potentially they're not exactly the right type of clients, but they're very busy and they need to build systems and structure into their whole business rather than just like the marketing and outreach to start with. So it's kind of like Client Quest is the initial marketing and outreach part, which you obviously need when you're starting out. And then Balanced Business Bootcamp is about building systems into the rest of your business. And it's really a lesson that I learned, because I was getting super burnt out doing Motion Hatch and freelancing as well. And what's really saved me and really, really helped me a lot, apart from having a small team, is actually building systems and processes in my business. So that's why I really wanted to coach and teach people more about that.
Yeah, I think that creative industries tend to have like this danger of like burnout, right? When you have just too much to do or overscoped? Or I'm interested, like, is that a pattern that you see happening with people starting out their careers? Is like if they get successful too quickly, they have too many clients and they can't quite comprehend. Like, I can imagine if I started out right now, that could be a danger for me. I could also have the danger of not getting any clients, but I'm thinking more about like if you were successful, I tend to struggle with like overscoping or like taking on too much. Is that a pattern that you see? And like, what advice do you have for people who are just starting out there?
Yes. So I think the biggest problem is because everyone, when you're running your own business, sometimes you have this fear of like, when is the next project coming? And I feel like even if you get quite far into that and you have clients coming to you quite a lot, that you just, some people can't let that go. And it's really understandable. So, and they'll also kind of go through the cycle where you might have a lot of work at one time, but then you'll have no work. And then you might have loads of work and then no work and loads of work, then no work. So it's not like you're, constantly booked necessarily. It's that you don't really have control over this. And I feel like that's where the fear comes from, because I live, I'm a bit of a control freak myself. Like I want to have control of things. And I feel like, having this really up and down, way of working is really stressful for people. And, I really want to help people with that. So what I think that most people need to do is, have a system so they can get more consistent leads coming to them. And then you have the confidence to be able to say no to people as well, right? Be able to say no. If you have more client leads coming to you, you can also be more choosy. You can pick what times of year you take off. You can take longer time off because you have the confidence knowing that through your marketing and your systems, you can consistently bring those clients in. And then I feel like that's really how you avoid that, because it's all coming from fear of like, I don't know when the next project is coming, and kind of doing this cycle of like, okay, I'll post on social media a little bit, or I'll work on my outreach, or I'll do a bit of it, and then maybe email like hundreds of people, then get a job in, then I won't do any of that for months. And then that means I've got no work, because people kind of forget about you. And then you end up doing it again and just emailing a lot of people. And then that creates these like big dips. Whereas really what you want to do is build a system that you can do consistently, even while you're busy and even while you're working on a project.
Yeah, I can imagine that solves a lot of things like sales conversations, asking for more, just that confidence.
Yeah,
So I know
exactly. It's a good point, like as well with the money, you can be more confident about charging more if you know that you have like other clients coming to you.
yeah. So I know we need to wrap up because you've got another call, but I just wanted to ask what's next for Motion Hatch and what you're thinking about at the moment. Like, where are you headed with the business and how you're trying to serve? Just interested where you're going.
Yeah, so we've spent I think like the past couple of years we haven't really released anything new. And that's because I was really focused on like how can we just improve, all the things that we've got. Like they're great anyway, but like I'm all about like I want to serve everyone the best that I possibly can. So we were working on that. But then going into 2025, what we're really looking at is like how can we solve this problem of really helping people to put these mini systems in place, but sort of holding them accountable to that as well. Because I think that the problem that I see is not really that people don't really know what to do. Like sometimes they do, but there's obviously a lot of, you know, videos out there about marketing and stuff. Like we put tons of information out there for free. And I think it's not really about like, oh, how do I market myself or how do I post on social media? Like, yes, some of the questions are about that. But I think once you get over that kind of hump and you understand a little bit about it, actually putting it into practice consistently, like we've been talking about, is the most difficult bit. So what we're looking to do is we're starting a membership community, which is kind of a bit like hush hush right now. I'm not even sure whether I'm supposed to be talking about it, to be honest. Like that's not even a joke. But like, I think that basically we're starting a membership community, which is going to be about that. It's going to be about providing the structure and the support and the accountability so you can actually consistently put this stuff into place to make everything easier. And we're going to do it with mini business challenges. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, I guess you heard it here first. I don't know.
Well, snatch. Nice. Hayley, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.